Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Magic gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Mighty Empire against the Dwarves, defending Leipziger Ford against these filthy stunties. So, as you can see here, we are going back to some of those original strats I'd kind of been messing around with back in Warhammer 1 days, and haven't really touched since in Warhammer 2. But I decided to go with the Empire gun line, and for those of you who didn't see it or who have never seen this in game, it's actually a pretty effective strat against Dawi. It involves massing handguns, and you can actually crush them pretty reliably. For my lord, I did bring Boris Todbringer. He's kind of usually the key to this. He is, of course, very hard for the Dawi to shut down just because he flies, he has huge mass, armor piercing. He does have Crush the Weak, which is a nice little AoE debuff. He does have the White Cloak of Ulrich for that extra melee attack debuff, and then the Midland Runefang for self-healing, so he's very hard to shut down. Obviously, the Fear and Terror isn't the greatest against all the Dwarf units. A lot of them do have immunity psychology, but nonetheless, you can definitely dish out a lot of hurt and escape from most situations. Alongside him, you can see that I have a very thin front line, and back in the day I used to do this with basically no front line. As you can no longer get as many handguns, you can't just mass straight handguns. I did decide to bring a little bit of a front line just to provide some support and hold the front. So I did bring an Empire Captain here to stiffen things up, as well as a Light Wizard. The Light Wizard has the Net of a Mintok as well as Banishment, and Banishment can potentially be pretty potent because the Dwarves tend to mass up and you can hit them. And of course he does have the Power Stone to get additional Winds of Magic. My front line is a mix of Spearmen, 3 units of them, as well as a single unit of Flagellants. And you might be wondering, why bring Flagellants against the Dwarves? Why not Greatswords or something like that? First of all, Flagellants are quite a bit cheaper, but second of all, they're actually good against Slayers, and that's really the main unit I'm kind of worried about. Slayers are fast enough to catch handguns. None of the other Dwarf infantry is. None of the other Dwarf units are really as much of a threat either. So Flagellants can potentially shut that down. Otherwise, they are unbreakable, so they will just stand their ground to the bitter end. And they did get a bit of a buff to their AP, so now they have 8 AP damage, so that means that with their high melee attack, they can definitely land a few hits and definitely hurt the Dwarves a little bit. For the rest of my army, we are very heavy in the shooting department. 6 units of handguns make up the core of this army. That you can see I've kind of spaced them out, staggered them out so they can get maximum value. These guys don't have the best range, and obviously they will never outtrade Thunders, they'll never outtrade Quarrelers or units like that. But because you can mass them, you bring 6 of them to the Dwarves aren't expecting this much firepower. They don't have the tools to shut all of them down. You simply are going to try to overwhelm their shooting with your own shooting. Out on the flanks, we do have the Silver Bullets, of course. These guys have stocks. They do cause magic damage, which isn't the greatest against Dwarves, but they do have slightly better rate of range and rate of fire, and of course that stock mechanic lets them get into an ideal position. Out on the flanks, 3 units of Outriders, adding further firepower to this lineup. These guys do have a little less ammo and overall potential DPS than the other the Empire handguns, but nonetheless they definitely dump their damage pretty quickly, and they're still 8 peak out damage dealers, so they can definitely tear a hole through most of the Dwarven infantry very effectively. Finally, over here on the flank we do have Sterling's Revenge, slowly but surely making their way around the flank. Sterling's Revenge can fight a little bit melee. They're definitely no pushovers with very solid melee stats. And the hope is that I can get them on the flank and they can just unload on the Dwarves. These guys have monstrous range stats. If you look at it, obviously only 90 range, but 14 armor-piercing missile damage with a very short reload. They can definitely offload a lot of damage quickly. For my opponent, he did decide to do a pretty boxed up and defensive build. You can see for his lord, he does have Grumbrindle somewhere here with most, if not all, of his items and abilities. He does have... I'm trying to get a good little beat here. He does have the Rune Elf Zufbar. You can see the cannons already taking off. Grumbrindle has no fear for Unbreakable, Foe Seeker, Flash Bomb, and the Rune Axe of Grumbrindle. So definitely a very potent lineup of tools. He is backed by an Engineer here who does have all of his abilities as well, including Entrenchment, Ballistics Calibration, and Extra Powder. And you can see he's already casting something there. And then my opponent does have a few cannons. It does look like he actually accidentally hit his Quarrelers here and the Master Engineer, but that's what, okay. 3 cannons, 3 Quarrelers. And so definitely a huge firing line here. They are backed by a single unit of Slayers. You can see out on the flanks some Longbeards with great weapons, Longbeards in the back. The front line is composed of Dwarf Warriors, and I do believe it's actually just Dwarf Warriors. So I don't believe I noticed that before. But the Longbeards are interesting enough in the back. Now you can see I'm pouring some fire into the edge of these guys, trying to chip away at these Longbeards. Unfortunately, the Outriders are a little bit stacked on top of each other, and they're not getting max value. Over here, in the meantime, though, we are pushing forward. I'm simply allowing the handgunners to take the front. I'm going to keep my infantry in reserve, ready to push up once they're needed. And you can see a Overcast Banishment here going down, ready to really annihilate this front line. And when Overcast does more damage, and of course the Dawi, who are just so clumped up, are taking a massive beating. Yes, it wanders off almost immediately, but nonetheless, this damage is immense. Almost half unit Quarrelers and much of these Dwarf Warriors down already. And soon the handguns are going to start teeing off, and you can see we're just doing some overwhelming fire on these Quarrelers. Obviously, we do have to fire over the Dwarf Warriors. The Dwarf Warriors will be soaking up some of that fire, but we just have so many shots going in, and really, it's going to be a dark day for the Dawi. They do try to tilt and adjust their angle here to get some shots into the Outriders, but we just have so much fire, and you can see it's raking their line, tearing through those those guys over there. These Quarrelers are really messed up. Ballistics calibration has gone down, but that only lasts so long, and these guys are getting torn to shreds. The Sterling's Revenge still closing. Unfortunately, I did get a little greedy here with the handgunners. A bit of an accident. I didn't realize I didn't have the arc of fire, but you can see these handguns are shredding the Quarrelers. Obviously, some of my handguns themselves are really messed up, but that is the loss I'm willing to take. I'm willing to accept in the name of destroying these guys. If I can trade 1-to-1 in the shooting department, that is more than adequate. I don't need to. I'll still win at that sort of rate. And you can see that overwhelming fire slowly but surely chipping away. These guys are out, and now we are shifting our fire to this next unit of Quarrelers. And I have actually tasked some of my handguns and some of my outriders now. We'll start chipping away at the cannon as well. And it's one of the things I think people don't realize is that shooting is actually pretty good at shutting down artillery. Or perhaps not yet, but eventually we will. In the meantime, you can see my opponent has finally started routing off one of my units of handguns. Grumbrindle is getting a little cheeky, so I do start pushing my flagellants forward to be ready to counter. You can see over here the cannons are getting shut down. You can see that gun immediately gets taken out, and so that is going to definitely whittle down the amount of fire my opponent can lay down on me. And cannons are not very good at supporting against these sorts of infantry blobs. Something like the Goblobber could be a little more potent, but my opponent doesn't have that on the field. You can see the Quarrelers getting overwhelmed. The cannon here just taking fire. All of the shots that fall short or overshoot are hitting the Dwarves. My opponent has used entrenchment, which is a little bit of an interesting choice on the Dwarves, but the extra physical just could help them. Nonetheless, you can see the cannons getting shredded, the Quarrelers getting shredded, and now the Sterling's Revenge is about to spring their ambush. These guys are definitely a bit of a brutal piece of work here. I'm pulling back my flagellants. I don't want them getting shot up by the Quarrelers for free. You can see the Sterling's Revenge is going to tee off on the cannons. In the meantime, the Outriders still on about half ammo, or actually more than half ammo, and they're doing a great job. And you can see these cannons getting taken offline. The Quarrelers are very low, and the flagellants are not going to push in. Unfortunately, I commit them here against the Dwarf Warriors. Perhaps not unfortunately, but I commit them against the Dwarf Warriors, looking to just tie these guys down. You can see the cannons getting torn to shreds. The Quarrelers are finally getting taken offline for good. Definitely my opponent was a little cautious and took a little while to get going. You can see I do net these Dwarf Warriors, and that's going to allow me to unleash a massive broadside, massive kind of firing line on these guys, and it's just unloading. I think there's definitely a bit of friendly fire here on these handgunners, but it's okay. They're taking one for the team. They're making Sigmar proud, and they are getting annihilated there in the pits. In the meantime, the Outriders are still harrying. You can see I'm diving in with Boris Todbringer, trying to force a rout here on some of these units. He does, of course, cause fear and terror, and in the meantime, my Spears are finally pushing forward to back up these flagellants. They're catching some of these Dwarf Warriors. The Spears will not win against Dwarf Warriors, maybe against a beaten-up unit like this, but they can provide that backup that I really need. Over here, the Captain will hold the Dwarf Warriors in place. Over here, the Silver Bullets do get caught. Definitely a bit of a mistake on my part. Should have been more on top micro, because Longbeards are very slow. But things are going pretty well. You can see the cannon is finally getting taken offline. This cannon is completely offline. It's only the Quarrelers and the Engineer at this point is still firing. It's definitely a dark day for the Dawi. Over here, the Spears are flanking around. They're going to be able to get into these Quarrelers, start shutting them down, and the Spearmen will outbeat them down. You can see my opponent has used Grumbrindle Knows No Fear, and so that's definitely a little bit of a problem for me. It's going to keep some of these units in the fray for a little bit longer, or quite a bit longer actually. Obviously, Boris isn't able to beat him. He is getting hit by Flash Bomb, which is very unfortunate. And you can see over here the flagellants are slowly but surely getting chipped away at. They have no melee defense now, and with no armor, that just means these guys are not long for this world, and especially with the, I do believe there's Slayers in the mix here. Or there were, never mind, the Slayers are moving away. Over here, the Spearmen still doing the Emperor proud, holding their line. The Empire Captain slaying out with these Dwarf Warriors, and over here, my opponent's Longbeards definitely doing their very best to catch these silver bullets, but they are going to get dove upon by Boris, and they're just getting shredded by all this pincer fire, but this flanking fire all over the place, just shutting these guys down very hard. Over here you can see the Outriders chipping away at some of the backline troops, focusing on the Master Engineer now, as the Captain finally finishes off some of these Dwarf Warriors. My opponent is really, at this point, down to some Longbeards and Grumbrindle. He does have, I guess, a pocket of Slayers here, so not the end of the world, but so many of these units at this point are shredded. The cannon obviously will not do well against Spears. The Engineer getting shot to death. Over here, I actually used the Sterling's Revenge to chase off some units, my opponent's units, but they do get caught because I have a lapse in micro, and they're going to get stuck fighting the Longbeards with weapons. But they are a decent enough melee unit, not amazing, but they can definitely hold their ground. And my opponent actually pulls away because he realizes that they're kind of baiting him away, and he's in a rough spot over here on the flank. In the meantime, the Outriders still unloading on the Master Engineer, overwhelming him with sheer fire. And as my opponent is going to withdraw, the Sterling's Revenge will start teeing off on the Longbeards and tearing them to shreds. Longbeards are not tanky at all against this sort of fire, and you can see they're going to take a massive beating there. The Engineer has routed. You can see the Longbeards and the Slayers have broken this line of spears. The Light Wizard has been forced to flee. Boris is doing his best to kind of shut down my opponent's troops, but he's really not quite suited for he's not really quite able to do that. He does dive here on the Grumbrindle, apply a little bit of pressure, but I'm going to have to move him shortly. Captain doing his best to catch these Slayers. You can see, though, using these Outriders to chip away at the Slayers, and my opponent is just forced to fall into this trap, into this sort of pit of massive amount of massive handgun fire. And when he tries to push forward, he is going to get caught here by the net, and immediately the handguns turn and they are going to unload. And just so much fire. These guys can't hold up against that the firepower of that magnitude. They really can't hold their ground. They're going to get routed. Obviously, Grimbrindle no longer has that unbreakable ability. Over here, the Light Wizard is taking one for the team once again. Just stall these Slayers. Buy me some time as the Longbeards and Slayers, as the Outriders actually dive in courageously, jumping into the fray here to fight these guys in melee. Obviously, that's not where the Outriders want to be, but it doesn't matter at this point. They're out of ammo. Some of these Slayers will get through. Against the handguns, definitely a bit of a problem, but you can see the captain's in there doing his best. I've set the captain to focus on the Slayers because they're the easiest target for him to hit and do damage to, and the Longbeards can't catch my infantry. The Slayers can. Over here, a lone flagellant, literally one guy on 47 HP, is chasing away an entire unit of 18 Dwarf Warriors. So definitely making Sigmar proud there. Dwarf Warriors here are pitched between two units of Spearmen, but you can see it's a bit of a wet noodle fight. Dwarf Warriors are not very good against Spearmen, because their melee attack is so low. Spearmen are not good against Dwarf Warriors because they have very low melee attack themselves and have atrocious AP. Over here you can see that Sterling's Revenge has been unloading on these poor Longbeards. My opponent actually using his entrenchment. I think he didn't realize that it shuts down his troops. Entrenchment locks your troops in place, which makes it decent again for shooting units if you've got a solid arc. It makes it decent if you're just trying to keep a unit alive while it holds its ground. But against this sort of firepower, it's really not good, and you can see the end game. It does come. Grimbrindle is here among some handgunners, but it really doesn't matter, as my opponent's army simply shatters to army losses. So, definitely a bit of a cheesy and definitely a bit of a gimmicky strat. It's not. It's a very functional strat, and I think people underestimate how powerful it can be and the fact that it might be brought against them. I'm not entirely sure if I'd recommend the Outriders or Outriders with grenade launchers in this situation. I did bring Outriders, the vanilla variant this time around, but perhaps the unit of Outriders grenade launchers would have been a good choice in there. Outriders with grenade launchers are actually pretty potent against Dawi, and despite not being armor piercing, because the Dawi tend to have very compact formations, they're very clumped up together. The Outriders with grenade launchers can easily get a volley in and run away, and when they get those volleys in, they can actually do quite a bit of work, even to Longbeards or Dwarf Warriors, which is really the bread and butter of the Dwarven infantry formations. For the rest of this army, the Spearmen obviously held their ground, did a good job. The Flagellants held their ground. That lone Patriot chasing off the Dwarven Warriors, definitely great work. Light Wizard with the Banishment, definitely some great work. Had it gone a little better, and that wasn't even an ideal cast of Banishment by any means. You can get much better cast of Banishment, of course. If it had the RNG been a little better, it could have wandered into a different area of my opponent's troops and it would have done even more damage, so it was definitely doing some great work there. The Empire Captain, shutting down the Slayers pretty effectively, or definitely brutalizing him a bit. Similarly, Boris diving around, causing mayhem where needed. The handguns, of course, did the majority of the heavy lifting, alongside the Sterling's Revenge and the Silver Bullets, with the Outriders providing some key support in shutting down specific units, like the cannons shutting down, giving flanking fire, forcing the crawlers to turn their attention, splitting my opponent's troops, that sort of stuff, and that is really, it's just a very powerful tool. Handguns do have better DPS than Thunders, for example, or at least they have better damage per volley. They might not have better damage over time, because while there's only 60 Thunders, they do fire a little bit faster, I think. But regardless, the handgunners actually have pretty comparable damage output to Thunders. They are a bit cheaper, and you can, obviously, because the Empire, you don't have to worry about the Dwarves catching you except Slayers. Obviously, gyrocopters can catch you, but who cares? You'll shoot them out of the sky. So really, the only threat to these guys is Slayers, and so you can afford to bring this sort of build and be ridiculous and actually cause immense damage. And especially if your opponent plays like what my opponent did here, trying to just let his shooting win the battle for him. You can see the Quarrelers raked in quite a few kills, 42, 34, so definitely not a bad performance. But if you rely on that sort of if your opponent definitely tries to rely on that sort of combat, you're going to be able to overwhelm him, surprise him with how much damage you're doing with your long-range fire, and crush him in the long run eventually. As his infantry finally starts pushing out, you can chip away at him, tear him to shreds over time. And it works. So definitely great game to my opponent. No name here. I don't know. There's been quite a few players who don't have a name. I don't know why that is. But regardless, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to post them down below and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.